Happy Friday, everybody. So got our quiz down, so we've got our Excel assignment. Before we start the Excel assignment, I kind of want to set the stage. This is something I discovered a few years ago, and it's not as relevant to you all, but it becomes increasingly relevant to me over time, and that's Social Security. And so I ran across this article. So first of all, one of the motivations behind this assignment as a whole is I do think that utilizing financial planning tools is very important. And Excel is an exceptional financial planning tool. Both the things that we're about to do today, or we're going to talk about, are tools that I use on a pretty regular basis. I want to say every day, but I don't look at them on an everyday basis, but I utilize them quite frequently. And so this is kind of something that you will find useful for your work experience, but you'll find more useful for your own personal experiences. And I encourage you to become acclimated to how to utilize these items. So kind of as an example for this, there was an article that I found in Yahoo, and the title of the article is "Why a Vast Majority of Americans Are Not Getting the Most Out of Social Security." And this is an article is talking about how people are kind of they're scamming themselves by taking Social Security early. Now, the argument that they make in the article is saying that if you take Social Security, if you take early retirement, that's at age 62. That's 5 years before you reach full retirement. Now you can basically opt out of Social Security payments all the way to 70. So there's a range of 62 to 70, and you get increasingly larger payments the longer you wait to go into it. And they're making an article saying if you're waiting, or if you're taking retirement at 62, then you're cutting yourself short because you're earning far less per year than you would if you waited until you were 67 or 70. Which I'm one of those people that I got professional skepticism. I don't know where that came from, okay, this whole professional skepticism thing that I possess. But I was reading this and I was thinking, this is really, really weird. This doesn't make any sense to me, because they're talking about what you would earn on an annual basis, but they're also ignoring the fact that there's a fewer number of years. Because when we talk about retirement, this is an unpleasant thing to think about, and hopefully it's not something you will have to think about for a very long time. But you're also closer to morbidity, okay? You're closer to the time that you won't have to draw any more salary, because you won't need it anymore. You'll be stuck in the ground with no expenses whatsoever. So that was something that I was kind of curious about. It's like, how do they make this claim? And of course, like I do whenever I get to kind of in my head and thinking about stuff like this, I started delving, and I started thinking, is there a way we can analyze this so we can come up with an answer whether this claim in this article are correct? So what I did is I pulled some information in the article. So in the article, or actually pulled some information from external sites, and the tax trap people are going to love this, because I started pulling tax information as well to associate with this. But basically, talking about claiming monthly benefits, and had to do with the calculation of primary insurance amount. And you can kind of see here that full retirement age 67 is what the current full retirement age, and they made an assumption that monthly payment would be $1,000 per month. And that was an easy scale to operate, because then you can kind of see what the relative percentages are at earlier ages and later ages. So if you retire early, you get 70% of whatever your monthly amount is. If you retire at the latest possible year in 1970, doesn't mean you have to retire at 70. It means that that's the last year you can defer receiving payments until. So you start receiving payments no matter what. Whether you're working or not, you still receiving your Social Security at 70. But that's 124%. And that made for a pretty easy analysis, because then we could start doing some detailed discussion about what would be the claims, and what would be the relative earnings that you achieve. Here's basically what I did. Is that I first of all, I set a return on investment of 5%. And we're going to, first of all, when I started doing analysis like this, I try to put my variables in highlights so that I can know what it is that I'm adjusting, so that I can figure out what changes I can make and things will fix. Then you'll notice I put life expectancy as 90, which some of you may say, Dr. Barnes, that's not correct. I happen to be an expert in this area, and I know that life expectancy in the United States is about 81 years old on average. And you're correct, okay? But the way the article frames this, they don't actually say life expectancy of 90. They say people who make it to 65 will usually live on average 20 to 25 years beyond that, which is a very clever way of framing it. So I guess the good news is if I make it to 65, then I've got another 20 years to look forward to. So yeah, some time for fun. Anyway, so life expectancy of 90, that was kind of their assumption there, which depending on your retirement age tells you how many years you're going to be drawing benefits. And then this thing called primary insurance amount, which was the $1,000 before. But if you're curious about when they do the calculation of this, this is actually kind of the current benefit for 2024. The primary insurance calculation takes 90% of the first $1,174 $74 that you earn on a monthly basis. 32% of earnings over that amount, but less than the 7,078, and then 15% of everything over 7,078. In other words, your Social Security retirements don't scale at a linear rate. They start dropping off pretty substantially early on. So pretty much everyone that's been in this room will get that 90% almost assuredly on their monthly payments, and then that 32% probably early in your career that will be your monthly earnings off, and then it'll be 50% after that. Now that's just the primary insurance amount calculation. That is done on a 35-year basis. So the highest 35 years of your earnings over the course of your career is what you will earn Social Security on. And so that's how the calculation works. Also, there's a few other things to note. This changes on an annual basis. This is what currently is for 2024. This usually goes up pretty good consistently every year, and they do adjust for inflation. So if you're panicked right now and saying that's not going to be very much when I retire, what you're earning right now will be relatively increased when you retire. So there's kind of a silver lining to that. I guess inflation can be adjusted for. Anyway, all that being said, I just kind of wanted to put that calculation out there for your knowledge, but I just left this at $1,000, so that's an easy way to operate from. Now, the percentages are what I derived from the previous table when I said 70% at 62 and 124% at age 70. And you can kind of see here that I ran the calculation and just created the formula for the present value formula. I said, all right, if I have the present value of $1,000 payments going to be for every month, and I'm going to do a calculation of how many years it's going to be. I said A6, which is this life expectancy number minus whatever this number is right here, which is going to be 62, and that number changes over time. And then I just do a present value calculation off of that, and then kind of calculate what the lifetime value is going to be. And lo and behold, what we end up finding is that if you retire at 66, that's the greatest amount of benefit, not full retirement age, okay? But you actually see kind of an increase and then a steady decrease. So there's a little bit of misleading tendency, because if you notice here, retired at 62, you get slightly more lifetime benefits than you would if you retired at 70. Now, this does not hold in every single scenario. The reason that I decided to make these numbers variable is because I wanted to see what is it that we would have to adjust to actually make this to the situation where they were talking about. So if you adjust this down to 4% ROI, you'll notice that this changes. The lifetime value actually goes significantly up later on. 68 and 69 are kind of where you achieve the highest results, and then 70, you're still much higher than you would be at 62. So if you expect a lower return on investment for whatever it is you're going to receive on Social Security benefits or your own personal benefits, then you would be better off waiting until later. But what if the opposite is true? What if you actually have a pretty nice market where you're going to receive 7% over the lifetime? Well, then it's much easier to retire early, much better to retire early because you get lifetime benefits that are much higher. Relatively speaking, this is present value calculation. So this is kind of highlights an interesting point, is that even though the statements that were made in the article are factually correct, they are misleading because they don't really give you all the criteria for actually making that judgment. Do you actually earn more on an annual basis? Absolutely. Do you earn more in aggregate over the lifetime? It depends. And even then, even if you earn more in aggregate, is it more when adjusted for present value? That gets really, really challenging to answer those questions. And I thought this was an interesting article. And I was trying to figure out why on earth would somebody try to make that preposterous claim that 62 is absolutely not the best time to retire. You should wait until 70. And it occurred to me that probably the focus of this article is not so much on trying to encourage people to get the most out of their money. It's more like, look, our workforce is shrinking. If you retire at 62, we do not have nearly as many resources, which is another opportunity cost, by the way, if you think about that. So if I decide I'm going to leave here at 62, then Truman's got to hire another accounting and auditing professor, and it will take them years to make as many memes as I've made in the time that I've been here, okay? So there's definitely a cost associated with that. I think that's maybe the argument of why this article was the way it was. It was trying to say, look, you can't leave the workforce early. We're having a lot of people leave the workforce right now. We need a healthy workforce, but they tried to moralize it or justify it through the framework of saying you'll make more money if you wait later. So interesting discussion to be had, to say the least. All right, so how does this relate to what we're talking about today? So two of the things that I think that you need to be very well acclimated to with respect to financial planning are amortization and budgeting. Now, the amortization, you're probably having flashbacks of Dr. Shawnee's 303 class and saying, oh, we got to write those out in longhand. That's going to be brutal. It says, no, actually, amortization is much, much easier when you have Excel at your hand, at your fingertips. You can do much quicker amortizations and much more powerful amortizations. The reason I say so, amortizations are really, really important because you want to be able to prove that your results are what they say they are. So I know everybody in this room has used the basic time value of money formulas, present value, future value, and payment, and should have some familiarity with those. Why I think amortizations are important is because having a full amortization shows you what your schedule looks like at any point in time in the future. So with my retirement planning, when I'm looking and saying, okay, what am I going to be at a certain age? I could actually create a formula to calculate that at a certain point in time if I know how long that is going to be in the future. If I just create the amortization table, though, I can create a table that shows me multiple different points in time. I don't have to recalculate my formula every time. So I like seeing that, and I think that's also valuable to see for something like a mortgage or a car payment, what your amount owed are, what the amount owed you have at a point in time is going to be, and be able to refer back to that, not just being able to refer what the final result is. So let's talk a little bit about how we set those up. And there's going to be two directions for amortizations. First of all, we're going to be talking about items that you owe on, and then we're going to be talking about items that you aggregate. And setting these up is a little bit different for the two scenarios. So we'll talk about those both. So let's just go ahead and do a basic assumption. And I probably should have had a template set up for these, but you guys can type along with me, okay? Let's say that you've graduated from the MAC program, and you're just going to finally say, finally, I'm getting a new car, okay? I'm getting a brand new car. Now, you want to buy a car, and you're just going to say, all right, how much can I afford? So we'll say that you've made the decision that you can probably afford what will be a good amount, a monthly payment a month. Because you want to say that it can be a lot. I made the first mistake. I made a mistake buying my first car, and I said, I can afford a really large monthly payment, and then I forgot insurance is also a thing. So don't want to get too outrageous here. Don't want to get too outrageous. Many of you will still be under, or many or most of you will be under 25, so your insurance payment may be larger than your car payment, so you have to be careful about that. But we'll go with a moderate one. Say $500 sounds like a good one. So let's just go ahead and start out with something like car payment, not apartment, payment, and another cell. We're going to put $500. And this is not going to be very polished because I'm typing this in, but this will show kind of what we need to be doing. All right. And we'll assume that most of you have reasonable credits. You haven't bought anything big, but you haven't done anything bad anyway, because you know not to use credit cards or to abuse credit cards. You can use credit cards, but you immediately pay them off. So nobody in this room has outstanding credit card balances, right? Right? Good. All right. I have to ask that, and then I see there's a guilty slink in the room, and it's just kind of like saying, okay, all right, yeah, we pay those credit cards off, so we don't get good credit ratings. So we can actually get a good percentage. Or so let's go ahead and say interest rate, just for context, is 5%. That's probably what something around 600 credit rating will get you in today's environment. Okay. And then we'll say loan term. What's a good loan term for a car? 60 months? Less time you can spend on this, but the better. But we'll say 60 months just so we can actually have a number for our amortization. We'll say 60 months, okay? And I'm just going to type over here so we know months. Also going to change this to number. All right, so let's go ahead and calculate what we think our car payment is going to be. Or what the amount of our car is going to be. So how much it is we're going to have to pay. So what are we going to do? So, or sorry, the value of the car that we purchased. That's what I say. So purchase price. So this is where we're going to use our present value formula. The present value, we know our rate, but remember our rate is going to be on a 5%. It's going to be on a monthly basis. So we need to do 5% divided by 12. Then we can just go ahead and put in 60 months. If you put in 5 years, you will need to put that into a monthly amount, so multiply 5 times 12. What's the future value of our purchase going to be? It's gonna be 0 because we're gonna pay it off, okay? So we just type in a 0 there. And then, oh, sorry, I guess we put our payment in first. My apologies. Let's put our payment in first. Let's go with that $500. Then we put in the future value at 0. You don't actually need to put that in, but just for context. And we'll just leave the type at an annuity due, which may not need to be a reasonable assumption, but I don't like messing with that. Or annuity, ordinary annuity, ordinary annuity. So at that, you can afford a car that is about $26,000, $26,500. I'm going to put a negative sign in there so it produces a positive amount, which is not bad. And you can adjust those variables. I want to leave these variables. I want to make these adjustments as variables, but I want to leave 60 months in there. We'll see why here in just a second. You can adjust these variables as needed. Technically, you could adjust this as well, but we're going to leave it at 60 months for the time being. So let's say that you say, all right, I got a really good job, Dr. Barnes. I can afford $70.50 a month. So then you can actually adjust and see what you can afford there. Or you may say, Dr. Barnes, my credit's not all that good. I'm going to be paying a lot on that interest rate. So you can kind of see what your payments are, what you can afford is going to be. So I expect everybody in this room to be able to do that. Whether or not you immediately remembered how to do everything, that's pretty straightforward. But how do we prove this? How do we actually show that this is what we're going to be doing our calculations for? So let's go ahead and create an amortization for this. And again, I apologize, it's very rough, but this is kind of how I expect you to set some things up through this. So let's just go ahead and start out with something called period. That's going to be our month, and I'm just going to say 1 right there. Actually, so I'm going to leave that blank because this is going to be our beginning. And then we'll say 1 right here. And we're going to say payment, interest, accrued, and you can do a 4th column here to do principal reduction. Usually I just go for the balance right here. So if you really want to do the calculation of the principal reduction, you can do that here. Make these all a similar width. So for our payments, we know what that is. We're going to start this, by the way, in period 1. So we'll do it here. We'll also make sure that those are absolute cell references. Our balance start is going to be whatever this amount is. And then the interest accrued is just basically going to be this number here times this number here is an absolute cell reference divided by 12. And then our balance is going to be the payment minus the interest accrued, because we reduce it by the principal. Oops, sorry. Payment minus principal owed minus the balance. So I guess I should probably back up. Let's try that again. Equals problem being old. Equals this minus, and then just for context in parentheses, payment minus the interest accrued. So I'll explain the formula real quick. So we start with the balance. We're going to reduce this by the principal amount that we removed, because part of this goes towards interest. Everything else that's not part of interest, everything else remaining in this $500 payment goes towards reducing the balance. So D7 minus B8 minus 6 is 6A, D8, which wouldn't work if you didn't do it in parentheses. That's why you can leave another column. You can say principal amount reduction, but that's going to be the case. All right, so now let's just do something shortcut. I'm going to do equals that plus 1 equals this plus 1. There we go. Oh, that is 2. Okay. And I'm just going to drag it down for 60 periods so that I can have, there we go. I was very lucky. I got it right on. And if you set the formula up correctly, which hope and pray that we did, just flash fill it. There you go. And what I really like, so the reason I didn't make the adjustment to 60 months, you can actually absolutely make the adjustment to 60 months and it will change the purchase price. But I wanted to leave an amortization table exactly at 60 months. And now, because I've got it set up 60 months and I know to adjust that, I can see what happens when I adjust my car payments. It will actually adjust the table itself as well. And will tell us all the information, not just the change in the purchase price. All right. So that's kind of all good and well. The other scenario where you might use an amortization table, and this is one that I use more frequently, is for savings or for investments, and you want to see what investments look like over a period of time. So this is going to follow a very similar pattern where we're going to know what a payment is, we're going to know what our interest rate is, and that's going to tell us what we're trying to angle for in the future, or we could just be accruing information. There's a little bit of difference in the amortization calculation that I want to point out. We're not going to go through the whole amortization process because I want you all to learn this a little bit on your own. But in this situation, it'd be a little bit more straightforward in the fact that I probably would not have. Let's see, I want to do this without trying to say, so I'm going to say, and I'll say set that. So in this case, I'm starting at a $0 balance. And you'll notice all my formulas got thrown off. So let's just say I'm paying $500 every month into investment accounts. So there's going to be a couple of differences here. So in this case, we're trying to actually trying to see what's going to happen in the investment account over time. And it's just $500 at the beginning of every period, and we can notice what's going to happen here. The little bit of a difference here is that instead of saying that we're going to be deducting here, instead, all of our numbers are going to get added together, because when you make a payment, you gain whatever that payment amount is. And when you gain interest, it gets added, it gets compounded in. So this particular situation, all I've done is I just changed this formula over here to D5 plus B6 plus C6. So I just added everything together instead of subtracting out the principal. And what you can see here is that in the first period, I make a payment of $500 and I accrue no interest because my balance is $0. So I have $500 balance. Next period, I make another $500 payment. I earn $2 on that $500 from the previous month. You can kind of see what's happened there. And then over 60 months, I'll have $34,000. And the interesting thing about this is I can expand this out for a much longer time frame. What would 30 years be? That would be 360 months. So, yeah, you guys are going to be working probably at least 30 years. So let's see. So if you started your savings once you immediately got out of college, and you started doing $500 a month at an interest rate of 5% every month or 5% every year, and didn't save that, 30 years from now you should have $416,000 in savings, and that's just one source of investment, or not savings, in your investment account. Now you can adjust those payment amounts. Let's do something real quick here. Freeze payments. And you can make some adjustments here and see what's going to be some other assumptions. Depending on your investment type, this may be a much higher rate. So you could say 7%, which substantially increases that. You can make higher payments. So save $1,000 because you all are going to be bringing in the money. So yeah, that's an easy way to make $1 million. I say easy way to make $1 million. 30 years of work, an easy way to make $1 million. So just some context for you to figure out. All right. The other item that I want to talk about is I want to talk about budgeting. Now, this is a little bit similar to the budgeting concepts that you all talked about in Dr. Otero's class, but it's also a little bit different. This is personal budgeting. My story behind this is that when I started working in public accounting, I was doing pretty well, making more money than I'd ever made before, and more money than either of my parents had made before. So I was feeling pretty good about myself. And I got pretty steady pay raises for a 5-year period. So I was really living high. And then I went to get my PhD. And when I got my PhD, my annual salary literally got cut in half. I had actually one of the better scholarships for my PhD program. It actually paid me a pretty substantial amount per year. It was still half of what I was making as an accountant. So I started out trying to live the same lifestyle that I lived when I was living in Dallas. And I was just kind of like, I got plenty of money. And I found out I did not have plenty of money. Okay. So I had to start being a lot more strict on my budget and start tracking everything, which is where I got this fascination. So this has been going on now for, I guess, going on 9 years. Anyway, basically, the idea behind tracking is that you have to have a system that's going to track what is going to be your expected expenditures for a given period, and then you're going to reconcile those to whatever your accounts are that you have open. So this is just an example of the budget that I use. If you have your own personal budget that you already use, that's great. Okay, you just need to show that to me. But this is kind of an example of what I put together. Now, I want to note here, these are not my actual numbers that I actually contribute. Okay. As much as I'd like to see that, you might see a paycheck of $2,000. That is not what I get paid. Okay, I get paid slightly less than that. Okay, well, slightly more than that. There's some items on here that I don't include, but these are kind of the way that I track information according to a fair period of time. So I got my own personal system. You are welcome to use this system for your project if you want to. If you want to develop your own system or you have your own system, that's fine. But there are a few elements that you need to be able to track. First of all, you need to be able to track what your expected expenditures are. So these are expenditures that occur. Then you also need to be able to track what your balance is after an expenditure. And by the way, this number should never go below 0. If it's gone below 0, you've done something wrong, because then you're basically saying, according to my expenditures, I'm going to be spending more than I'm making, which, as we all know, as accounting students, not a good idea to spend more than you make. Okay, so that's going to be kind of what we're using to track. Now, we'll talk about the reconciliation mechanism in a second, but I want to talk a little bit about some items that I have up here that are a little bit confusing. So first of all, you notice discretionary spending. This is my allowance for personal spending. I actually track this on my phone. I've got the Notepad app on my iPhone, which is about the only thing I really use it for. But I do actually track what my allowance is. My allowance is pretty broad. I considered anything that I have control over spending to be an allowance for personal spending, which includes gasoline, groceries. You may say, well, those aren't discretionary. I say, well, I have discretion over the amount, even if I don't necessarily have discretion over the fact that I do have to buy food. Okay, I do have to buy gasoline. Also, when you see these the green highlights and the yellow highlights, my green highlights are transactions that have cleared. And usually when they clear, I actually record the actual amount. I go in and record what the actual amounts are. The yellow ones are items that are pending but have not cleared, which usually my discretionary spending is open until the end of the month because I'm still spending all that money. And then the gas bill, I've already made a payment on it, but it's not cleared by bank. That would just be what that would show. The final thing you may notice is these are all rounded to the nearest 5, and this is a point of contention for some people. Some people want to reconcile to the nearest penny. Okay, my father was one of those individuals, and if that's you, that's fine. I'm an auditing professor. I'm just kind of like, what is the material amount? Is that a material difference? And if not, I'm going to move on with my life. Okay. Usually for materiality, for my purposes, I try to get within like about $50. And if it's more than $50 difference, that's when I investigate. It's not a $50 overall difference, not an individual transaction, by the way. I'm talking about the reconciliation needs to be within $50. That's why I record at $5 and I make my reconciliations all in $5 increments. So how does the reconciliation work? So I update the reconciliation for a point in time. And by the way, this is a really important point because the assignment says that you have to perform a reconciliation. You only have to pour in one single reconciliation, not a reconciliation for all the months that you have to make the budget. You can't actually do that because you're not at that point in time in the future. You can't reconcile because you don't know what those numbers are in the future. So you can only do it for the current period of time, but you're going to make a planning budget for the entire school year. But I've got my balance per books and balance per bank because that's what you do. That's how you reconcile information about what those numbers are. There are some adjustments that you have to be aware of. So like anything that I have remaining in my spending, I add that back into my back to my books because I have not spent that yet. And then anything that's still clearing, remember that yellow highlight, that $50 right here that was still clearing? That's that other right there. It's not cleared yet, so it's still in the bank. Okay, it's still in the bank. So that's what I would say my net balance for books is. On the bank side, anything that you've got in your bank account is basically what you're going to be recording. If you have credit cards, you also have to make adjustments for those because like we said earlier, we always pay off our credit cards, pay our credit cards. So we're going to know what those balances are. And whatever those balances are, they get cleared at the end of the month. Okay, they get cleared at the end of the month. So if you've got one credit card, whatever that balance is going to offset the bank. And where these are added together, the credit card balance will actually be subtracted to come up with a net balance per bank. So that's basically how I do my budget. Now, again, there's no one right way to go about this. Again, if you want to do something different, the only thing that I require is that you track according to a pretty defined system. You have to show me what the transaction is, what the amount of the transaction is, and where it leaves your financial planning position. And then you have to have a reconciliation mechanism. Those are kind of my requirements for this particular assignment. That being said, the format that I provided for you here has all that, so you can use that as a basis. The assignment that's on Brightspace actually has an example of the budgeting tool that I use. It's in a PDF. You can't just copy my Excel file and say, that's good. I mean, that would be what a nice person would do, but I've got limits to my niceness. Okay, limits to my niceness. So what's your assignment here? Well, we've got 4 tasks, okay? The first 2 are going to be amortization tasks. The first one is going to be buying a house. Please make sure you note all of the factors that are in buying the house, because that will dictate how much you can spend on your house, because I add some detail. I expect most everybody in this room to actually have an annual salary greater than $48,000 per year. But the reason I use that number is because it divides very nicely. Okay, it's a multiple of 12. And then moving forward, we're going to do some future retirement planning. You're going to tell me, all right, how much do you need to invest each month to retire with $1 million in 40 years? Now, one thing I will tell you with these amortization tools is I encourage you, and not only just do them, just hold on to them for the future, because you may find them useful for planning in the future. Like if you buy your own house or you buy your own car, or as I encourage you to do, if you start planning for retirement very, very early on and start saving early, then you will find out you'll find out these be very useful for your planning. You won't have to rely on an investment advisor to give you all that information. Part 3 is a 10-month personal budget. It's going to start August so last month, and then you're going to run all the way till May, which is going to be graduation. Everybody in this room, yeah. Not Jordan. Sorry, Jordan. You're still going to have to do 1 through May. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. You're going to do a personal budget for the 2025, which for many of you will be very easy. Jordan, you're going to have to count in a new job. How about that? All right. That's something that you're going to have to include in the budget. Again, there's got to be items that are going to be description of the transaction allowance, the amount of transaction allowance, the running total amount in the budget. Those do need to be included, even if that's not in your current budget system. You're going to have to adapt it to have that, because those are the requirements. You also need to make sure you have a reconciliation mechanism, and most importantly, your items should never go into negatives. Okay, should never go into negatives, because we do not run in negatives in accounting. I know you're going to say the U.S. government does that all the time. We are not the U.S. government in this room. All right. And then there's a reconciliation system to talk about here. There's a couple of things right here. Please make sure that you are reasonable with your calculations. You do not need to tell me what your real life budgets are. I know that's personal information, so that's not stuff you have to share with me. You want to make up numbers, that's fine. Just make up reasonable numbers, okay? Don't want to hear about, I had $1 million in maintenance this month on my luxury yacht, okay? That's going to cause me to come to you and say, do you actually own a luxury yacht? Because then I'm going to start planning max celebrations dinners on your luxury yacht. Okay, so that's kind of the goal. And then I don't care if you want to actually do my rounding system or if you want to go to the exact penny. If I'm going to do material differences, you guys can do material differences too. So that's your assignment. We've only got like 6 minutes left, so I don't think that there's really any point in letting you get started on this. I mean, unless you already have, you feel free to continue to work. But I'm going to call it as a class here, and we'll be back on Monday for whatever it is our next topic is.